Coming up, I go face to face with a wild dingo.
Dingo wants to take down large prey like a kangaroo.
Even frogs get camera shy.
There is a Gillen's green tree.
Where'd he go?
And I attempt the hand jive.
Crashing together, pressure from the north and south, causing the orogeny.
This is Central Australia, the West MacDonnell Ranges to be precise, home to some of the most stunning scenery on the planet.
This is our first stop into the West Macs. It's the mighty Simpsons Gap and it's an impressive sight. The place is known for its rich wildlife, wallabies, frogs, birds, and they're here for one important reason. There's a permanent body of water just down there. Where I'm standing is a dry, sandy creek bed, and in times of good rain, this would run like a river.
On first viewing, there doesn't seem to be much going on.
This is a fig tree, and it's in fruit. They're not quite ripe yet. The tree's a dead giveaway that there's water close by. It's a big, thirsty tree, and their roots go down deep and far. And if this was a survival situation and I couldn't see a pool of water here, I know that if I dig in that dry riverbed, I'll find water. Pretty helpful to know if I was stuck.
I've arrived just before dusk, and there's a reason for that. With a keen eye and a bit of patience, it's not long before the Gap's wildlife begins to show itself.
Just there is a black-footed rock wallaby, and they only live on these hillsides throughout Central Australia. And their ability to navigate these hills is unbelievable. They've got thick pads on the bottom of their feet that grip to the rock. And they know this. This is their backyard, every rock, every hop. And they need to, because on the ground you've got dingoes, and up high you've got eagles. Now, they're a little bit camouflaged, so they blend in, but they rely on that ability, the fright or flight response.
All animals need water to survive, and the black-footed rock wallaby is no different. But it's a shy animal, always on the lookout for danger. So a watering hole, no matter how close at hand, isn't really an option when it needs a drink. They can get the majority of the water they need from their food. They come out to feed at dawn and dusk and will eat a range of native grasses, shrubs and fruits. But they do venture down to ground level for a drink from time to time.
These holes in the riverbed mightn't look like much, but they're a survival strategy of the wallabies. The main body of water is just there, but wallabies all over Australia have figured out that that might be staked out by a dingo here or a crocodile in the top end. Now, the wallabies dig little holes in the sand, further away from the main body of water. They fill with a shallow pool, and that's where they get their drink.
To keep water use to a minimum, they hole up in caves during the hottest hours of the day. It's a common trait out here in the hot, arid, red centre of Australia. They used to be found a lot further afield, but unfortunately, the same old tale of predation by introduced pests like the fox has meant a drastic reduction in numbers.
Permanent water like this in the middle of the arid zone is a little oasis and a haven for wildlife. Most animals are too cautious to come down and drink through the day, maybe birds, and that's about it. But after dark, this place will come to life. There's an animal group here that love water, but one in particular, he's buried about a metre beneath where I'm standing in this sand, and he'll only come out when it's dark. That's when I'm going to come back.
Nighttime doesn't take long to come about out here. The sun drops real quick, and it's such an exciting time to be out looking for wildlife. So what do you think I was referring to that buries down in the sand during daylight hours? Remember, this is a hot and dry place, so you probably wouldn't expect to find them out here. That's a Spencer's burrowing frog, and they're found from the central west coast all the way to the centre of Australia. Basically, some of the hottest places in the country.
And right now, he was coming out of the soil. I've just startled him a bit, and he's heading back in. Just his head's out. Hear that? Dingoes. Geez, there's a few of them.
We'll come back to him. Those dingoes aren't far away. Let's check them out.
I can't see any dingo prints here, so they must have been just on the other side of that water. There was a good maybe 4 or 5, mum, dad, and a few pups, maybe. Oh, yeah, right there, look at that, look at that. Oh, wow. Oh! Oh!
can see their eyes, green eyes looking back. 1, 2, 3, just through the other side of that gorge. It's pretty special to see dingoes. One of my favourites. And with that, they're gone. Back to that frog. I wonder if he's still there. When it's dry, the burrowing frog uses extensions on their hind legs to dig backwards into the sand in search of somewhere moist. They'll then sleep there until a downpour awakens them, which brings them back to the surface to feed and reproduce. Walking around, it seems to me the population of frogs is getting healthier at every turn. The Spencer's is an opportunistic feeder. It'll take whatever insects are available. And like all frogs, it doesn't chew its food, but swallows it whole. As I said, the frog population here is healthy.
It's a little desert tree frog. Pretty common in the outback.
It's one of the few Australian frogs that inhabits arid, tropical and temperate climates. It's not a burrower though. It'll shelter under rocks and leaf litter to avoid the sun.
That's a Gillen's green tree frog. It's the first one I've ever seen. They're only found right here in Central Australia. You know, frogs all over the world are disappearing. They are the early warning signal that something's not right within an ecosystem. That might be climate change, habitat destruction, feral pests, pollutants.
The fact they are here though, along with all the other frog species I've seen, says to me this place is doing well. It's alive. So alive, in fact, I keep on spotting them.
Another Gillen's. Look at that.
It's also known as the Centralian tree frog. As far as tree frogs go in this area, the Gillen's is fairly large. The female grows up to 8 centimetres in length, the male's a centimetre or so shorter. Food sources again are insects, and just like their local cousins, they hide away during the day, under rocks and the like, before becoming active at night. All the time I've been scouting for frogs, I've sensed a presence above me.
Microbat. There he is. It's hard to follow. There he is. There's 2 or 3 microbats that are working up and down this gorge. I've lost him now. There's a few of them just flying up and down here, using the walls of this gorge and hunting for insects. There's a snake. There's a snake. Look at that. Stimson's python. This is a Stimson's python, one of the smallest python species in Australia. And it's almost full grown. It's a couple of hours after dark, and it's out looking for a feed, maybe a small mammal or a gecko. They're constrictors, so anything they do grab, they're gonna coil around and tighten until it runs out of air, and then it gets swallowed whole. And pretty cleverly camouflaged. That pattern, I mean, that looks like a real pretty snake to me, but that pattern just blends in with these rocks and grasses. And they're a pretty common python throughout the top end and middle of Australia. But I think the ones here in the centre are by far the prettiest. And he's off now. I'm gonna leave him be.
End of my first night in the West Macs. Frogs, bats, dingoes and a python. Not a bad haul. Up and out early next morning. It's a fair trek out to my first stop of the day. The MacDonnell Ranges are a freak of Australian geography. You see, they run east to west, and that's unique in our landscape as all other mountain ranges run north-south. We're heading out to Ormiston Gorge, a truly monumental feature near the start of the West Macs. 1 billion years ago, the middle of the Australian continent was kind of like a big bowl, surrounded by mountain ranges. These fed sediment into the basin and left a sandstone floor that in places was up to 10 kilometres thick. However, it didn't last.
There's been some incredible geological events here and massive upheaval of the Earth. And those spectacular red cliffs behind me are layers of quartzite stacked on top of each other like slices of bread. A mountain building event called the Alice Springs orogeny happened right here 300 to 350 million years ago. It was formed by tectonic plates crashing together, pressure from the north and south causing the orogeny.
If you're wondering where the word orogeny comes from, well, like a lot of our language, it's Greek. Oros for mountain and Genesis for creation. And that's exactly what happened. a mountain building event.
Back then, these hills looked very different. They stood 4,500 metres tall. That's only half the size of Mount Everest, but still massively impressive. Wind, rain and harsh conditions have eroded the hills down to leave what we see here today.
And that change in colours in the cliff face, that's not a change in rock. They're both quartzite, one on top of the other. The top layer was thrust over the other. In fact, it travelled over 2 kilometres from the north before it rested here. And the old seafloor, well, that's down below. We can see that thanks to the deposits of limestone, dolomite and mudstone that are scattered about.
The hillsides are dominated by mallee trees and spinifex, and it provides refuge for many species, reptiles, snakes, insects. But one in particular, a small mammal, is critically endangered, thought to be extinct until rediscovered 15 kilometres from where I'm standing in 1996. Hadn't been seen since the 1960s. It's the central rock rat.
Unfortunately, he's proving as elusive today as he was prior to being discovered.
Look at this. I'm right down in the bottom of the gorge. The hills are right up there behind me. And this is the old seafloor.
It's formed from the preserved sedimentary deposits of a massive former sea. It spread across Central Australia and was called the Amadeus Basin. The ripple marks are the same as you can see today on a calm beach, formed by the movement of water caused by the tides and waves.
You can see that floor in layers, maybe millions of years apart.
Over time, these layers were buried and compacted to dense sandstone and remained hidden until the orogeny exposed it for us to see today. Down at the bottom of the gorge are a number of waterholes fed by springs. One is 14 metres deep, and despite the heat of the day, here in the midst of the Australian summer, it's cold, really cold. And of course, where there's water, there's wildlife. Without these holes, not much could survive around here. They even attract fellas that would normally be found thousands of kilometres away on the coast. Maybe this cormorant got lost somewhere along the way. A little way down the ranges are these spectacular ochre pits.
Now, ochre is an important part of Aboriginal culture. It's used almost daily for everything from ceremonial dance to medicines and even protecting tools.
Ochre can be found all around the world and has been used to paint and decorate things since way back. In fact, some of the Western world's most famous paintings were painted using it. The West Arunda peoples that call this region home have been using these pits for thousands of years themselves, and to them, the colours are significant.
Whites and yellows used mainly for decoration and cosmetics. But red ochre is the most symbolic. It's used for major ceremonies. Mixed with animal fat, perhaps that from an emu, goanna or a possum, it's made into a paste, and then it can be smeared on the body with a finger or a feather. It was central to the preparation of many medicines, and mixed with animal fats, it would help protect tools like boomerangs and spears.
To Indigenous peoples all over Australia, ochre pits are sacred sites. Historically, it's been traded with tribes who were unfortunate enough not to have a ready supply. The Western Arunda ochre is considered to be some of the best, as its colours are so vivid and contains a slight sheen.
The West Macs harbours a wealth of stories, not just the history from its traditional owners, the West Arunda, but also the early pioneers. Fred Raggett was the second owner of Glen Helen Station. To some people, he was the meanest, stingiest man they'd ever met. He even built parts of his home from old jam tins. Behind me is the original spot of the old homestead, and just over there is the last standing relic. It's the old meat house. But there's one thing he did love, and that's nature. He wouldn't let anyone shoot ducks or even fish on his property. I reckon he'd be considered a bit of an early conservationist. But he was tough, real tough. And those early pioneers, they had to be. Now one day, old Fred was thrown from his horse and he busted his leg bad. The nearest hospital, that's 1,000 kilometres away. There's no cars, no flying doctor service, and Fred had some stockmen working for him, and they went and got him some splints. And remember, there's no anaesthetic. Fred just had to bite onto a bit of timber, grit his teeth, and he snapped that bone right back into place. He was way out on the station and he had to stay put.
Now, his stockmen, they built him a shelter, made sure he had water, and every now and then they'd turn up with a bit of damper and meat. In time, he was up on a crutch, and after about 3 months, he was getting around okay. Stories like that aren't uncommon amongst the early pioneers. They really did have it tough out here.
I have big hopes of seeing one of my favourite local birds somewhere along the West Macs. The dusky grass wren is a magical tick on the list of birders, but it's a tough bird to track down. Its chosen habitat isn't the most accessible. It rarely leaves the spiky protection of the spinifex it lives in, only occasionally popping up to survey its surroundings. This land of ours constantly amazes me. There's such a rich diversity of life here that no matter how many times I return, there's always something new to see.
I've been up and down these riverbeds, all of this trip and many trips gone by. And there's one specialist that lives in the hollows of these ghost gums, and it's only found right here in Central Australia. Today, I found one.
That's him. Isn't he fantastic?
Now, I'm going to bring him out, but there's one little problem. Well, actually, it's a big problem. There's a heat-seeking missile with razor-sharp teeth sitting at the other end of that hollow, and I don't want my hand to be its lunch. Now, I'm just going to put the hand in gently, try and touch him. Perhaps the head will move, then I'll just bring him out. Oops. Look at that. It's a snake. Python, actually. Hello, mate. That's a Centralian carpet python. And you know, they were only described and discovered about 30 years ago. You know, anything new to science that recent, that's pretty special. And what a snake they are. And they're a real specialist out here. This is a big snake, a big python, and they're able to go without water for a long time. They live up in these hollows, they're cool, always have a nice ambient temperature. It's pretty hot out here all the time, so you're actually looking for the cool, not the heat. And they'd eat anything that happened to come along. A galah, parrots, bats, lizards, and if they need to hunt, they'll come out, they'll head around, maybe take a small wallaby, anything they can find. Being a python, they're a constrictor. So they wrap around their prey. And each time that prey takes a breath out, the snake gets a little bit tighter and a little bit tighter until it can't breathe. Then you get swallowed head first. Carpet pythons are found all over Australia, but different species. And this one, Centralian carpet python, is only found in and around Alice Springs, just in these dry creek beds up in the ghost gums. Now, pythons have perfected the art of locating prey and grabbing it. This fella's got heat-sensing pits, bottom and top jaw. Most pythons do, but some, like your black-headed python or your woma, they don't have any pits because they mainly eat reptiles, cold-blooded. Doesn't make sense to have heat-sensing pits. Carpet pythons in particular have big pits all over the face. And what they do, they use their forked tongue and they'd locate prey, OK? There's a bit of scent, I can smell that. Once they get within range, they switch to a different mode. The heat sensor pits come into play. Little bit of eyesight, find that prey, bang, grab it, constrict. Nothing's getting away from this. Now, I've had a few pythons around my neck at different times, and I've been caught out. They got a bit of a loop around, and a snake of this size will still give you a run for your money. They're tough. That's just one solid muscle the whole way down. And by the look of this fella, he's had plenty of practice using it. You don't get this big without being able to find food.
The important thing's put him back where we found him.
I don't think you'll have any problems with that. Up you go, mate. Straight in. Look at that, straight back in, right down the end. That was a pretty cool snake. Certainly one I've never seen in the wild. Probably won't again for some time.
A Centralian carpet python, what a winner! And a new reptile to put on the list that I've never seen before. I've had a fantastic time out here in the wonderful West Macs. It's a stunning part of the country with some amazing wildlife. And on the way back to base, it has one more surprise for me.
Here's a dingo. It's a beautiful looking dog, lean like they should be. Look at him trotting there. Wow. Here he goes. He's pretty timid, he's weary. And that's normally what dingoes are like. They avoid confrontation. They don't want to come into contact with us. He'll just trot up that track and he'll stay. He'll probably stop there soon. Just stay where he can see us. There he is. And he's looking back. I love dingoes, one of my favourite Australian animals. It's great to see a dingo out here. They perform a really important role. They keep other predators, feral predators, like the cat and the fox at bay. And the dingo wants to take down large prey like a kangaroo. The cat and the fox eat everything small, marsupials, reptiles, and wherever there's a dingo, you don't have a fox or a cat. And that means the protection of our small native wildlife. Good way to finish the day.